Yes.
Excellent.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Francesca.
Oh, no.
Francesca, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent.
There is a time lag. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by welcoming you all today. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Zeina Jallad. I'm an assistant professor of international law and the director of the Palestine Land Studies Center here at AUB. We are a research center dedicated to preserving, documenting, and advancing critical scholarship on Palestine. For those of you joining us for the first time, more than that, we're a space that pushes boundaries where history, law, and justice are not just studied but challenged and reimagined. Today's event is not just a conversation, it's a culmination. Documenting, and advancing. For the past few months, we have been building a critical chapter on accountability, international law, and the fate of Palestine. Are not just studied, but asking what happens when the very frameworks meant to protect people fail them. We began with Michael Fakhri, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, which PLSC helped him produce his report on starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. We then hosted Diana Butto, Dareli, Omar Shabi, Huwaida Arraf, Diala Shammas, and Thanasis Kambaryanis, leading voices and practitioners in international law. Produce his report on starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. We then hosted Diana Butto, Dareli, Omar Shabi, Huwaida Arraf. For those who missed out some parts, you get it here. Leading voices and where did I stop last? International law.
She has her phone on speaker.
Oh. So I tell Francesca to put. Francesca, can you mute your phone?
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone. I can hear you. Not very well, though. It breaks a lot. I hope you will hear me.
We do. And with Ardem says, ICJ Palestine team legal advisor, we examined how the UN has historically acted not just as a vehicle for Palestinian liberation, but instead as a system of legal containment. And now we are arriving at this moment with two friends of mine, Francesca Albanese and Dr. Jamil Mouawad. Francesca is not just a legal scholar. She's a force of nature in international legal community. As the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, she has faced relentless political attacks simply for stating what the law already makes clear. But as she herself said it, we should not fear words, we should fear crimes. Dr. Jamil Mouawad is an assistant professor in the PSPA department and a fellow here at the IFI. He worked on state-society relations in Lebanon and is the co-founder of the Beirut School for Critical Security Studies. So today we're here to speak the words that must be spoken. We are witnessing a defining moment in international law. Major powers openly defy court rulings. International legal mobilization has not stopped arms shipments or the sweeping criminality of Israel. It hasn't stopped at Gaza only, with the ongoing creeping violence in the West Bank and here in Lebanon. And Palestinians, once again, are left asking what recourse remains when the legal order fails. So today we go beyond the headlines. We ask, how do we move from the recognition to deterrence? How do we make non-repetition a reality? And how do we turn to the law from a shield for impunity to a tool for resistance? And as always, at PLSC, we do this not just as a research institution, but as a community. Our mission is simple: be a space where learning, collaboration, and action meet. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our collaboration and partnership with Issam al-Faris, Dr. Joseph Bahoud, PSPA, Dr. Tariq Tal, the administration and the student club for their collaborative efforts. Without all our partnerships and many of you in the rooms who've been critical part of this journey for the past months, without you, this would have not been possible. I also want to recognize my team. These are the people, please raise your hands, the We're all new in this space, and without you, this would have not been possible. With that, it's my honor to welcome Francesca Albanese, and I hope next time you'll be with us in person. Ahlan, Francesca. Welcome. She can hear us. Can you hear us?
I can't. It's very low. I mean, the volume is very, very low. I can't understand most of what is said. Sorry.
Let me try with the other mic. Maybe Jamil's voice will be clearer. Is it any better?
No, perhaps I'm trying to also connect from another device so as to be able to use my headphones, if they allow me. Need to accept me.
Okay, so if you connect from another device, maybe the way we'll proceed, Jamil will take the conversation from here, and he'll be having the conversation with you. So maybe with the questions from Jamil, you can start, and while we figure this out. And after we have the conversation between Jamil and Francesca, we'll turn to you with some Q&A. What?
So we have to give her some time so she can.
We can send the text. Yeah.
Can anyone allow me to enter from my other device, please?
Yes, please, take your time.
Okay.
Someone in the...
هي عندها الناس عم يسمعونا عادي على اللايف ستريم. So it's her. Yeah, it's hers.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can hear you clearly. Can you hear us?
No. Just ask me the question.
What if you
Just ask me the question in the most simple way you can.
Francesca, we have two Francescas here with us. So maybe, okay, now we only have one. So that's better.
Yes, Zeina.
Can you hear me now? No?
Something is wrong.
Yeah, clearly something is wrong. Is it your laptop, your phone? Is it what?
Can you just ask me the question?
Yeah.
And as I said, in the most simple, try to raise your voice and I will do my best to listen to it.
You want to send a picture? Or she can open her phone and just...
Okay, Francesca, I sent you my notes on WhatsApp. Okay? So, okay.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is you take 1 minute, you read these notes, I ask the question here, and then you can answer.
Oh. Yeah. No, I read the question. I read the question, so I can answer.
But then I have to ask it out loud here, so the audience knows exactly what the question is, and therefore what is your answer to this very specific question. Deal?
Okay, so yeah, you are interested in understanding what shaped my thinking. I have not really articulated this in my mind, but I do believe that I'm not different to anyone else in the room. We are the result of whatever we have been fed with, not just physically, but intellectually. So surely there is the fact that I was raised in a family where there was an incredible interest and understanding, but it was an interest to in the others, in other people. I mean, I grew up in a socialist family, and this has clearly had an impact in who I am. It was a family where education was more important than anything else, and I've been raised in a family where we have always read a lot. I've always read a lot, and this is something that it has stayed with me. In terms of who has inspired me, but so many, from the political sphere to literature, and it spans a broad range, but still across the European spectrum, what we would call the global South has entered my life pretty late. I mean, when I was in my late 20s, and when I've understood how wonderful the contribution to scholarship, legal scholarship, for example, was from scholars from Africa or from Asia, Southeast Asia. And again, the Arab world is something that has entered, like the European upbringing, but the rest of the world, not much. It's something recent. And in terms of, my legal thinking has been shaped in recent years, in the last 2 decades, very much by the third world approach to international law and decoloniality. And this is something that I insist upon, and this is something that concerns all of us. I think that the reason why, despite there is a huge movement today in solidarity with the Palestinians, the reason why it's not successful, it's because we have so many boundaries in our mind, first and foremost, in the way we build, we carry our existence. We stay within the confines that have been given to us. So civil servants demonstrate in the confine of their space, and so doctors and so students. It's very difficult to break these boundaries and see how we can reunite in a movement like water. We are in our silos. Each movement is in a silo. We need to rise above the breaking points of the silo and unite. Why do I think so? Because I'm not just a lawyer who thinks that the system is falling apart. It's absolutely falling apart. And while the system, the multilateral order, has not served everyone, it has particularly protected people in what is called, for lack of better words, global north. It is collapsing, and it will take a lot of the conquest of the past decades in terms in codification of human rights with it. So this is why I do look at the society and how societies have evolved. Oops, sorry.
Francesca, can you hear me? Francesca, open the phone. Open your WhatsApp. Francesca, yeah. Let's have a conversation via WhatsApp. Then this is at least that's to mitigate process for this.
Okay, Francesca, the thing is, you read the question, but the audience didn't really understand the question because I didn't have the time to ask it. You can go on. The question was about her personal, intellectual, and academic trajectory. These are things that we don't hear often on media, mainstream media, or even in conferences. So we wanted to know a bit about what has shaped really her intellectual and academic trajectory, but also some people who have inspired her. And I had a question about that moment she decided to apply for the special rapporteur position after Professor Richard Falk. So that was the question, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but then you can go on and answer whatever other points you have to raise here. Francesca, you're on mute now. No.
It's getting really complicated. And sorry, I cannot, my computer is also, it didn't, let's put it like that. My computer didn't survive Germany. So be patient with me, because I'm also relying on very scant technological support. So just wave, Zeina, And if you want to interrupt me, just wave. Fine, and I will stop talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I hope, my God, that's difficult. It's just out of love for Lebanon that I'm subjecting myself to this. I wish I could be with you today, seriously. And so I think you heard me saying that being raised in a socialist cradle clearly helped me develop some socialist, like less selfish, less individualistic attitude to life, which you need very much when you step into the world that discusses Palestine. You really need to be ready to get a lot of punches wherever you go. It doesn't matter. In the Arab world, like in the global north, it's okay. You need to deal with punches. So you need to have this attitude. I would like to mention one person, one intellectual who has really influenced me, because I think it has influenced all of us in a way, in as much as I say, oh, Antonio Gramsci. No, I think that there is someone who has shaped our understanding of the world more than anyone else. And I'm not trying to say something that will make me even more lovable among you, but it's Edward Said. I don't think that there is one intellectual that has shaped my way of looking at the world more than Edward Said. And there are so many things that I keep on understanding. For example, I've said it before, imperialism is something that Edward Said has written about in connection with colonialism. But it's only this year that it became very, very clear. So I hope that as he has helped me and others understand the problem, he can also, his words and his enlightenment must keep on shining upon us as we face probably the most dangerous phase we have collectively faced as a humanity in the last 80 years.
Okay, I'll try. Now we're going to send Francesca probably my second question. You cannot hear us, do you?
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. It works for some reason. Don't touch anything, please.
But also, please share the question in writing,
okay.
Because the problem is that when you speak, got it. So you can read the question, and I will follow.
Okay, so we just sent you the question, the second question. So the question is that based on what we just heard in terms of personal trajectory, we know that as a special rapporteur, you have a global support, you have a global support base, but also you face relentless criticism, whether accusations of anti-Semitism, you're facing some legal challenges as well, some cases for so-called financial misconduct, or there are most recently very aggressive attempts to silence Francesca Albanese, and here I'm referring specifically to her recent visit in Berlin when basically she was not allowed to give a talk at the Free Berlin University, so they had to move to someone else. So I just want to ask you, how do you cope with this pressure? For at least 2 years now, have you ever reached a point where you said on the individual level, I can no longer take this anymore? But building on what you just said in terms of this split between North and South, and where does Edward Said comes in the picture, I'm going to quote what you just said, what you said 2 days ago after this Berlin incident, when you were in a room, and this room was surrounded by the Berlin police. You said, and I'm going to quote, I have to admit that about 70 hours in this country, and this country being Germany, it made me feel really nervous, and I cannot wait to go back to peaceful Tunisia. So this is very important to this reference between what Europe has become in terms of a crackdown on academia and the freedom of expression, but also perhaps more importantly, what this global south, in this case Tunisia, represent. And this is when for a long time
we've portrayed the Arab world as a beacon of authoritarianism. So my question to you, and when it comes to silencing, other than how you cope with these strategies, is what kind of arguments do you face when you talk to people? Do they often mobilize the law in order to exert this kind of silencing? Do they have legal arguments against you? Or do they have political arguments? And then in return, how do you do to break this silencing? Do you use only legal narratives and discourse, or your interventions often have a political dimension? And my question to you is that in the case of the genocide in Gaza, can we really separate between the law and politics? And are they not co-constitutive?
Yeah. I heard you. So, first of all, let me say that the people you have quoted are mouthpieces of the Israeli propaganda. I have accused Israel to have committed acts of genocide and the United States to be the most complicit, the country who's the most complicit with the crimes that Israel has been committing against the Palestinian people for decades. Europe is no less, but it is no less morally responsible. But there is no question that when it comes to counting, also from a financial point of view, who has been the biggest enabler, no question, it's the United States. And it's the United States across decades. Doesn't matter the color of, the dominant party. When it comes to Palestine, everyone has been in every US administration, probably with one exception, Jimmy Carter, all others have been supporting Israel to continue the colonization of Palestine. So I do not expect Israel and the United States to embrace me. I expected this criticism. What I do not want is that these people are given oxygen that they do not have and they do not deserve. Because while there have been, yes, of course, two countries and their acolytes, Germany. I mean, Germany is as responsible as the US today. And I'll comment on what I've seen that has really scared me. I knew that Germany was cracking down on freedom of expression, freedom of assembly of its citizens, of anyone, Muslim, Christians, atheist, Jewish, any person who would stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. But I had no idea of how far this had gone. They are already beyond reason. They are already in a realm of madness. It's like a collective psychosis. And this, as an Italian who has learned her history, her country history, and who's, for many reasons, goes hand in hand with German history, I'm scared. Because we have already seen other times the Germans operating like a herd. And this doesn't make me feel any better. So, and I will comment about that. But so also let's look at the rest of the world. Let's look at the so many countries, including in Europe, who are supporting my mandate and the work I do. And I don't think that there is anything special about me other than I've engaged with the media more than any of my predecessors has done before. Have I ever said, I cannot cope with this anymore? Yes, all the time. But I want to understand what I cannot cope with. It's the bullism, the institutional bullism that dominates the political debate. It's these mafia-style techniques that are deployed over and over and shamelessly in daylight more than ever before. Yes, this is what I cannot cope with. The rest, no, absolutely. Because again, I'm as a person who really believes in human rights, not just as a tool of emancipation, but as the result of the struggles for emancipation of so many, I think our responsibility is first and foremost not to give in to pressure, to protect the line of what we have gained so far as a humanity, and then push forward to advance toward greater betterment for many more. But we are not there. The pushback so as to make us lose our rights continues. So let me tell you, what do people say against me? I cannot say they're really real legal arguments, because no legal arguments can ever be deployed to justify genocide. No self-defense, no the rights that are claimed against the Palestinian people, biblical rights whatsoever. No political arguments, because, you know, I'm not even someone who can be accused not to be inclusive. When I say I think that end of genocide, end of occupation, and end of apartheid between the river and the sea, something for which I could have gone to jail in Germany, and I want to tell you what happened, but because it's really scary. But the thing is that what I say, I often underline that is going to be liberating for the Israeli Jews themselves, because you cannot brutalize and subjugate and really try to erase another people without having your humanity erased in return. What remains of a society which is so pervaded by a genocidal code, which doesn't recognize either the sanctity, which doesn't recognize the sanctity of life, even in children, parts of which are cheering the killing of children. There is a level of monstrosity in the debate right now that continues to dehumanize the Palestinians, and this should make us freak out as a collective. And so, of course, the arguments I use to push back on this hinge first and foremost on international law. But there is that much that international law can explain, because then there are questions that international law cannot answer. And this is one of these is the following: how can the death of dozens of thousands of children and their parents and the destruction of anything they had leave us indifferent? This has nothing to do with our legal rights or international law. This has to do with humanity that is so selectively applied. And the reason why we are still there is moral and social, and can be explained sociologically and anthropologically. We are racist, profoundly racist, in Europe like in other parts of the world. And my beloved friends in the Arab world should not get upset with me for saying that. I mean, it's not, when I say peaceful Tunisia, I say peaceful Tunisia, because it's not that this is the beacon of respect for human rights or for fundamental freedoms like freedom of expression. No, and still, it's better than Germany. Because in Germany, the police has been calling the United Nations to check whether I could be arrested. A UN independent expert, they have been checking whether I had diplomatic status, because otherwise they could have leveled criminal charges against me. Because saying from the river to the sea, whatever it means, can lead to a criminal offense. And also, I dare talking of the Holocaust, which is also part of my history as European. It's not something that I can be taken away from me, because this is very much also what I've been raised to know, so that nothing like this could happen again. In Germany, if you talk of the Holocaust in connection with the other genocide that have been committed, the millions of people who have been genocided throughout colonialism and settler colonialism, and if you even talk about that genocide in connection with the other genocide that Germany has committed, then you relativize, I'm not joking, you relativize the Holocaust and therefore you can be held criminally liable. The point is that this is beyond what human reasons can deal with. And this is why I say I've seen people not engaging with the arguments. They have already shut down the argument. They do not engage. Many of them act like a herd, like a pack. And this is why I've not been defended. Me and Professor Eyal Weizman have not been defended by the scholarly community, who has said, well, what these two say is problematic. Nonetheless, they should be allowed to speak. This is the progressive part of Germany right now. And this is, of course, there are others, but they are a minority. Those who speak out are a minority. And this is why I'm really, really scared today.
Okay. Of course, as you just mentioned, international law doesn't answer everything, and then there is a need for another struggle that is. But here, at least in Beirut, in Palestine, and don't forget that, of course, the Israelis, inflicted violence on us here in the south, and in Beirut specifically as well. But a lot of people are now disempowered and disenchanted by something called international law. Often when we invite students to a conference on international law, they say this is something that does not exist, and then they're very skeptical about what does the international law mean. And last week we had scholar Ardim Sayes, who here in Beirut, who talked about what he calls as the legal subalternity. So how do we overcome this? Is it by the legal arguments only? And the international law as it is right now, is it sufficient for the struggles that we should take, or we should rethink the foundations of the international law altogether from a global south perspective, be it legally or even institutionally? The reason why I'm bringing up this question is that 2 weeks ago I was at the University of Baghdad in a conference, and then some scholars were arguing that we should revisit the definition of a genocide, because the current definition of what does constitute a genocide doesn't really include the many mass killings that took place in Syria and in Iraq specifically. And this sparked a very interesting controversy, because some scholars were saying we should not think about even redefining what does genocide mean, because this is the only thing that's left for us to defend Palestine, specifically was the ICJ ruling, while others were saying, in any case, international law has no impact whatsoever on the ground, and the ICJ couldn't stop the killing and the genocide, couldn't stop the war in Lebanon. So why don't we take this adventurous track and redefine and to start to propose new definitions for a genocide or for the infrastructure, institutional infrastructure of the international law, UN included. So I just want to ask you, where do you stand from this debate? Do you really argue for legal continuity as a pragmatic tool, or we have to rethink everything all together?
Yeah, thank you. I have the feeling that as a collective, at least to those who engage in the debate on the value and power of international law, move between two opposites. Those who have a hyper faith in international law, and those who sees no value in international law per se. And I think that there is a fallacy in both, but we should try not to throw the baby out with the bath water. So international law is a normative framework. It's not supposed to punch and kick per se. In the sense, it doesn't activate itself on its own. It's a set of imperatives for states and enabling tools for states and peoples. It's what Ardim says, talks about in his book about a subalternity, a legal subalternity as intrinsic in international law is true. 80 years ago, the United Nations was created on reflecting a profoundly unequal world order. Lebanon, for example, or Saudi Arabia and other Arab states were part of the international legal order, which discussed the question of Palestine. But most of the world was under colonial yoke. Back then, there were over 50, between 50 and 53, I always forget the number, but maximum 53 member states as part of the international community. Today, there are 193. So the world, the United Nations has democratized, and still there is an element of that entrenched subalternity, which is also reflected in the legal system. And this is the veto power that exists at the United Nations level, at the Security Council level. However, we shouldn't think that without the United Nations, without the Security Council veto power, the problem is over, because sovereignty ultimately remains with member states. And what have member states done to change, to counter the subalternity? I'm telling you, not much, because had member states, again, in what we call the Global South, united better, more strategically, probably the system could have been countered a bit more. There is still a lot of individualism that dominates our societies and reflects in the international community. Of course, I'm not blaming the Global South. I'm saying that while the interests of the empire, that is clearly epitomized by the West, and now more and more you see this crisis inside the Western Bloc, and the US rising above all, and even getting rid of the Europeans, because what do we contribute? How do we contribute to the discussion other than being the vassals of the United States? So there is this subalternity, and now we see it, and we have the opportunity to undo it. There is the possibility. This is the law of entropy. Each chaos generates a new equilibrium, a new balance, and we have the opportunity to orient this new balance and being more human than it has been, serve more people's interests than just a few. I don't necessarily think that the problem is with the law as it is written, because again, the democratic push has made some changes. The right of self-determination, which is what is ultimately violated by the crime of genocide, is enshrined, it's there. The problem is not with the law per se, it's with its enforcement. And we know that law enforcement depends on political will. We need to continue to expand the basis of that political will. And I hear you. I don't know enough about the debate that spurred in Baghdad, but I don't think that it's right now is really the moment to think of how to expand the definition of the genocide the crime of genocide, so that it becomes a catch-all reality. It's not, but it's very serious to say that crimes against humanity and war crimes have been committed. It's not, again, we should stop thinking of international crime as a hierarchy. So the lower level is war crimes, and then there are crimes against humanity, and then the crime of genocide. No, we should see them horizontally. And they're all very serious, and they all lead to individual responsibility, like criminal liability, or the responsibility of member states. The point is that war crimes are violations of the law of war that happen in the context of a conflict. Crimes against humanity are widespread and systemic violations of people rights, and they can happen including in a non-conflict situation. While genocide are specific acts, specific crimes that happen against, I mean, with the intent to destroy a people as such. It's the intent to destroy the group as such, the identified group as such. So it might be identified in Syria and in other places. I simply don't know, because this is not what I'm looking at. But I wouldn't go as far as saying, oh, the problem is with the way crimes are framed, simply because it's not true. I mean, even when it's framed like a crime like genocide, and clearly it applies to the case of Palestine, not because I say that, but because the International Court of Justice has recognized the plausibility of genocide being committed already 1 year and 1 month ago, and nothing happens. Again, I keep on saying we need to realize that the power is at the state level, and we can, when the states are not that strong, it's our power as people, and we are not used to think beyond the boundaries. We should unionize the workers of the world, or the students. The students have done it. The students have showed the possibility that for a global movement. But my generation doesn't get it. My generation doesn't follow. So while protesters across the world have mobilized from university campuses, having the same articulation of their claims in each university, wanting the university to cut ties with the Israeli occupation. We have not done the same as scholars, as workers, as lawyers, as journalists, and this is the problem. We do not know how to make a popular front against the aberration that we are seeing today. So changing the law, you want to engage in this debate, it's intellectual rhetoric to me, compared to the gravity of that is not very necessary right now in the time of crisis that we live. And I say that with all due respect, of course, and without knowing the depth of the conversation that has taken place in Iraq.
Okay, thanks very much. That's I'm honored to have asked you these questions, and now I'll leave the floor to Zeina to maybe if she has some comments before we give the floor to the audience.
Thank you, Jamil, and thanks a lot, Francesca. Are you able to hear me now? Yeah. Again? No. No? And this? Yeah, okay, so it's this mic. That's the magic mic.
Mm-hmm. Eat up each other.
Okay. Thanks a lot. What I'd like for us to do now is, I have a couple of questions from the audience that they shared with us earlier, and I'd like to open it up for you. So, from the audience, most of the questions were actually revolving around what kind of faith we can retain when this moment has been such a bleak and ongoing moment of depression. And the other question that was very repetitive, how we can retain hope in international law when everything seems to be just running out. And I heard you now speaking about your role and how you got into this role, and then we all know like the kind of attacks that you've been subject to, and also the kind of silencing that not only you, we have law professors, Catherine Franke at Columbia University, a 10-year professor. Also, she had no one in the community to support her on the campus as much as she would have hoped for. We see all these silencing attempts. So we see the attack on the law as well as the attack on those who are trying to speak the language of the law or the language of justice. At the same time, we're seeing how the US is exiting international law. The US is defunding UNRWA, sanctioning the ICC prosecutor, disrespecting international orders. So in this very moment where we see the legal order is being redefined and reimagined for the purpose of advantaging some at the expense of others, how do we retain our hope? And how do we, after 16 months, like some of the achievements have been on the language of genocide became an acceptable language for us to hear. As we've normalized hearing the language of genocide, why don't we normalize the language of sanctions today? What does it take for us to talk about sanctioning Israel, to talk about unfreezing the membership of Israel in international bodies, to talk about unseating Israel or expelling even Israel. So the question on sanctions and what does it take for us to hear more on sanctioning as a call for justice?
Look, I will go back to a thought that comes from reading Gramsci. The old world, the old order is dying, a new one is forming. And the danger is in the middle, because this is when monsters arise. And this is where we are right now. I think that we are at a turning point in history. And it would be much better, much easier if many people had not forgotten the past, meaning where we come from, which is a place we understand now more and more that injustice is part of humanity, and there is an internal struggle to get rid of this injustice and to make our world a place where humans treat each other as equals. Doesn't matter the color of the skin, doesn't matter the religion, doesn't matter the political credo. We are not there yet, but we have the potential to make that advancement. And I'm not sure we are there because we are slow. We are very slow, while the system has imperialism has not surrendered, has just changed, has just gone on hiding. It's like this is the real phoenix, in fact. It has gone sort of hidden for a while, and now it has kept on living through the vein of capitalist societies, and no one is immune from that, no society. This is how we have grown more and more selfish and more protected. I mean, it's a perceived sense of protection in our cocoon, but no one is safe. And I think that, the Lebanese have my full solidarity. In October last year, I could only imagine how many in Lebanon felt, because all of a sudden, the hell had opened under their feet, while the people in Gaza were enduring that. All of a sudden, this hit straight in the face the Lebanese society. I've been saying that for months, and this is not that the Lebanese people have no idea of what Israel brutality is. Of course, it's ingrained, it's inscribed in the history of the country. And at the same time, I know that the brutality that you have experienced in the last months has been unique, but it's been somewhat unprecedented. But this is the script that has been used in Gaza. And I was warning everyone against it. I was saying, what has been done to Gaza, meaning this humanitarian camouflage, this justifying that everyone is killable and everything is destroyable in the name of pursuing like a militarily justified objective, which is not. This is a way to violate international law by stating the contrary. I called it humanitarian camouflage. The fact that there has not been a push against it, including by Arab countries. This is, again, we are seeing at the international level how selfish we are as individuals. If we are unable to stick to one another at the societal level, how can we be able to do so internationally? Again, I really hope you follow me, because I'm in this past 15 months is just have been for me, seeing the world for what it is. I've been forced to move out of my individual life and see how we behave as a collective more than I would have wanted. And now I cannot escape this reality. It's something I see and I cannot unsee it anymore. This is why I hope my words will land upon you as a wake-up call, upon you and others. This is a wake-up call. And we go to the first part of your question, Zeina, how we keep hope. I think that we need to fully understand what hope is. I mean, it's not an emotion, it's not a feeling, it's not optimism. As I often quote this Mariam Kebe, an African-American educator and activist, who says, hope is a discipline. In order to stay hopeful, we need to follow rules. And I personally know that the rules we have to follow as a society have already been written. Yes, we can engage in debate on how right now the rules are not perfect. But do we understand what's happening? Do we understand that also those rules risk to explode and not to serve any purpose? So while human rights, the human rights system is clearly imperfect and need to be strengthened, we will miss it very much when we don't have it anymore. Even that sparkle of protection is being erased, eroded. And this is why, I think, yes, international law is not sufficient. And yes, it's part of the necessary toolkit we use and refer to, because this is something that cannot be taken away from us. All the rest is still to be fought for, and fought for forcefully by each individual, wherever he or she is. And this will have a multiplier effect if it's carried out in all countries and globally. We are preparing ourselves. Someone in our societies is preparing him or herself for a revolution. Whether it will happen or not depends on all of us.
I'll open it up now for the audience, and then we can come back to the other part of the question on sanctions and normalizing sanctions as much as we're normalizing now hearing about genocide. So the S word.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't get it. I didn't get the word sanction until now.
Yeah, I think many other people around the world do not get the word sanctions. And then we need to talk more about sanctions.
But
as
I
a
use
mode of
it a lot.
justice, huh?
Again, sorry, Zeina, you mentioned why it's been so difficult to expel Israel from the United Nations. I'm, again, even asking for a suspension of Israel's voting rights, as I've done, has been extremely challenging. But because there is no unity in international community, there is no unity. There should be. So when we say that the General Assembly shouldn't be acting like should act like a democratic assembly where people keep on bringing forward their views of the world, their views of how to comply with international law, but then should act coherently at the national level. So even member states who criticize Israel and the United States internationally in the General Assembly then have military ties, economic ties, financial ties, especially with Israel, including its occupation regime. And we are talking of countries, including in the Arab region. So we need to be honest. Again, the system is not going to change unless we embrace honesty and consistency to the fullest.
Thank you, Francesca. Let's get a couple of questions, and knowing that now we have our technical issue, so Francesca might not be able to hear all of the questions. We can start. Please, yes. I'll pass this mic. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Francesca, for your time. Is this good enough? Can you hear me, Francesca? Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead with it. So my question kind of references something which Dr. Mouawad spoke about concerning possible different venues for struggle in relation to international law, and which also refers to what you most recently spoke about international law being certainly necessary but not sufficient. But really, like, if I was to articulate my question spot on, I would say, for yourself as a special rapporteur that is well-versed in international law, would you say that, or to what extent would you find different venues of struggle against genocide and against the brutality that we currently live in, like the time of monsters, as you've put it? How compatible would you find different venues of struggle with the struggles in international law? And specifically what I have in mind is not the pacifist struggles against the monsters, right? Against imperialism, but rather venues of struggle which employ violence, which employ militancy in an attempt to counter this sort of brutality. To what extent would you find these violent struggles compatible with the struggles in international law? Are they mutually exclusive, or would you find them in some instances complementary? If you can assist with that. And if I was to drive my argument home, specifically in the case of Lebanon, and namely in reference to Security Council Resolution 1701. So this has been active since the ceasefire in 2006. It has been re-employed in the most recent ceasefire. It's, to a large extent, it has its loopholes. People in Lebanon have exploited these loopholes, specifically in terms of maintaining this militancy against imperialism. So the resolution in 2006 aimed for disarmament, specifically in regards to the clause that says that calls for the disarmament in southern Litani.
I have to.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, because we are struggling with the
right. So do you want me to
okay.
just brief up the question?
No, I did. I already sent her a message. Thank you. Let's keep the questions brief instead of doing a question and then a brief. Thank you. Adonis?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is it audible? So thank you so much for this talk. I'd like to touch base more about, back to Dr. Zeina's point about sanctions and normalizing the word sanctions. On your socials, you've been supporting the Hague Group, which is basically a coalition of governments trying to make their own thing in international law, and actually target Israel's violation. And I trust more states will join soon, like you've noted. So how do you envision this coalition influencing the enforcement of international law, and what strategic actions should they take as an initial step? Because I feel that this is the first pragmatic solution in fighting Israel's atrocities. If you didn't hear me well, I'm talking about the Hague Group that you've supported on your socials.
Francesca, I sent you a message with this.
Yes, okay. Shall I answer these questions, or do you want to take another one?
Yeah, we can answer these and then come back.
So first of all, let me talk. So there are 3 points: venues for struggle and the space for violence, and sanctions in particular, and then what the ICJ might bring about. So, of course, the venues for struggle are several, and there is violence is not outlawed in international system, is put under check, under control. So that, for example, the use of force in international law is disciplined to the aim of reducing the losses, or to bring humanity where it was 8 years ago at the end of 2 world wars. So while violence is not ruled out and is controlled, it belongs both to the states and to individuals. So I often say the right to resist that the Palestinians have under international law, like any other people, who faces oppression or aggression against their right of self-determination, being the Ukrainian or being the Lebanese or being any other people. This is something enshrined in international law, while the states have the right, has the right to self-defense. The people have the right to resist as an expression, the first of its sovereignty, and the second, the people, has the right of self-determination. So sovereignty is the equivalent of self-determination. Sovereignty belongs to the state. Self-determination belongs to the people. And so while a state has the right to defend itself when attacked, so the people have the right to resist when they are attacked. It's not that complicated. The venues for struggle, are therefore numerous. I tend to prefer the legal struggle because this is who I've chosen to be as a person, as a human rights lawyer, and so I do believe that there is merit to advance the defense of fundamental rights through strategic litigation, being it at international level, International Court of Justice or International Criminal Court, or even more at the domestic level. Think of, for example, what is being done by the Hind Rajab Foundation. This is critical, and it must continue. But of course, it cannot be it all, because when the point is that when the law is violated at the country level, there is a case can be won in court, but it's also fought for outside the court. And so this is why sometimes there is a need for societal change. For example, just for you to understand exactly what I'm saying. At the moment, civil society in Europe, like in Denmark, in the UK, and in the Netherlands, civil society groups are suing the government to their respective governments for violating international law. So this is precious, but it's also, and these cases are such, they challenge the power so much that might lose in court if there is pressure. As for example, it has already happened in some European courts that the pressure from the state or the government was so strong that led to a diversion of the course of justice. But this is why there should be a societal upheaval, a societal interest, and this cannot happen if journalists and scholars and intellectuals do not talk about that. And sanctions is a critical element of it that should be of the struggle, because sanctions are measures imposed either by the international community as such through the Security Council or by individual states to influence a state's behavior. In this case, sanctions that are asked against Israel are for Israel to comply with international law. So to end genocide, to end the occupation, to end apartheid. This is what the sanctions should be for, and should be economic, diplomatic, military, and travel sanctions. So, of course, there is a movement. There is the BDS, for example, the Boycott, Divest and Sanctions movement, which has been the most active in putting those three requests together. I mean, those three tools, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions together. I think there is still very little at the international level among member states to advance sanctions. This is my perspective from within the UN, although as an independent voice, there is very little to advance sanctions. And this is why I've often addressed Arab states so that they could use their collective power, standing within one another. And because they've clearly, as the situation in Jordan and Egypt shows nowadays, and I hope you understand what I'm saying, no one has to gain, no one can gain anything by being alone, standing alone against the illegality that has become systemic, not just in Palestine, but internationally because of this alliance between the US and Israel. So sanctions should be asked or imposed by the Arab, could be imposed and could be asked, advocated for by the Arab region. I mean, the Arab region had a boycott law before anyone else in 1944 as the League of Arab States, and this has decreased over and over to the point that you have countries like Morocco who are buying military services for a clear purpose that is not very, very liberal from Elbit, which is the major Israeli company producing weapons. So you see, there is so much. I mean, we can keep on blaming the West, but I don't think that the Arab world has been that consistent with the rights of the Palestinians either. So we need to change something from from inside our own societies.
Thank you, Francesca, for this round. Do we have other questions in the room? Yeah, we can take the ones from the back until.
Sorry, the follow. Yes, the follow-up to the ICJ. What do I expect from the ICJ? So there are two important developments at the ICJ. The first is the ICJ genocide case. There are two cases, one initiated by South Africa versus Israel, and the other one initiated by Nicaragua versus Germany. These cases need to continue to be supported, so more states should join. So, for example, I think that a great initiative that has raised, and it's a significant step forward, is that of the Hague Group. This coalition of 9 states. No states from the Arab world is still part of it. No state from the West is still part of it, and it's very sad. But this is the state of the world we live in. So it keeps on demanding action. But again, the Hague Group has done something important because of all the international legal obligations that member states have. These states have decided not to trade with armies with Israel, not to sell, not to buy weapons or military services from Israel, to close their ports, to not to harbor anything transferring military aid to Israel, and to pursue accountability so as to follow up on the ICC arrest warrants, for example. Because so there is the ICJ case, there is the ICC case, where war crimes and crimes against humanity against the Palestinians have been found and led to indictment of 2 Israeli military leaders. There is another important case which I mentioned, is the advisory opinion that the ICJ issued last year, and that found Israel's presence, both military, civilian, and the control of natural resources, so unlawful that it needs to stop immediather. So sanctions, boycotts, and divestment are compulsory nowadays in order to comply with international law and with the ICJ. So in the face of the crimes that continue relentlessly, it's absolutely necessary, on the one hand, at the state level, to continue initiatives like the one initiated by the Hague Group, but also continue to document ourselves and to understand how we need to build that international law compliant discourse into each of our asks. Again, I insist, not just as a political, but as an intellectual community, because scholars can do a lot, and they have done a lot in the past 15 months. And still, it is to continue to be instilled so as to change the political discourse, to sensitize people and to change the political discourse at country level.
Thank you, Francesca. If we can do one last round of questions, we'll start from the back and move to.
Sorry, Zeina, while you collect other... I realized that you should send me a question that I didn't answer concerning Trump. I will answer this in the last round of questions.
You mentioned that Arab states were inconsistent among the Arab world regarding the genocide that's happening in Gaza. Do you believe that normalization is near with countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries, and is it further polarizing the Arab nations among their stance against, in Palestine? Thank you.
There was another question here. No.
Hi, Francesca. I want to thank you for everything, but you most probably cannot hear me, so I'm going to make this quick. And so I know that the Free University in Berlin and the University of Munich has canceled your talks twice because of anti-Semitism, and you had to switch venues multiple times a day. So concerning that, how do you view the increasing political pressure on UN officials when discussing Palestine? Like, does this set a precedent of silencing human rights discourse? And Germany has justified canceling your talks by citing concerns of neutrality and balance. How do you respond to the argument? And if you can talk about the cancellation of your talks in Germany, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm WhatsApping the questions.
Okay. Can you hear me? There's an attack on the humanitarian aid architecture, whether it's with the UNRWA ban or whether with the new Israeli crackdown on INGOs, which limits what they can say. And there's also the bills in Congress that would limit American NGOs, what they can say, what they can do, and the recent, effect of the stop work orders and the financial limitations. How can the UN act as a framework to stop this crackdown on the humanitarian aid architecture that can have, implication not just on Palestine, but also just in general? UNRWA is a UN agency that sets a very dangerous precedence, and also the precedence of using private military companies in Palestine right now. And because it's a UN agency, but the UN basically just rolled over. And my second question would be, you mentioned the Hague Group. There are also state-level initiatives for sanctions, and from Latin America, there's also very strong statements from the African Union. So these regions kind of seem to be working in silos. Why have these silos not connected into a serious movement, especially in UNGA, in the UN General Assembly, to apply the several resolutions that are already there? For example, about the advisory opinion on the occupation. There is an UNGA resolution, and states have to report back on how they have applied that. So why there is no political will to kind of unite those efforts?
Thank you. And
okay,
there was one last.
Shall I? Zeina, shall I answer?
2 more questions, and then you can answer 8 questions together.
So should I go for it? Yeah. Thank you, Francesca, for the very interesting talk today. My question is related to what you mentioned just earlier about the responsibility of the Arab countries in uniting and supporting Palestine and supporting this battle against genocide, which is ongoing. The question is, as you know, United States, through Israel, has been dividing and conquering the Middle East and the Arab countries for at least 20 years now, starting by the Gulf countries. So in the sake of unity of the Arab countries and having a strong ally with a veto power, do you think the Arab countries should seek partnership in a stronger way with the BRICS bloc, and without mentioning them, China as a veto owner? And thank you.
And the last question.
Hi, how are you? Francesca, I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's always wanted to work for the UN or in humanitarian organizations or NGOs, but is growing further, like being disillusioned by working in them, by their continued failed, actions on human rights, what would you say, or what advice would you give to young people studying in human rights or international affairs that want to work in these organizations like the UN? And would you say that's still a progressive path or a productive path for protecting human rights? And how do you personally manage your anger in a professional way or in a personal way when you're being attacked, and how do you manage that?
That was the last but not least. How do you manage your anger, and how do you manage when you're under attack? We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, let me start. So first of all, there was a question from before that remained sort of unanswered. What do I make of Trump's plan? I said it very early, it's deranged. But the fact that it's deranged doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. And it's very, very dangerous. And we see why, for two reasons. First of all, because it's setting the tone, this unlawfulness, this lawlessness, it's the new normal. And people, because we act as a herd and not as intelligent constituencies who react and act instead of simply waiting for the worst to be avoided, I think it's incredibly serious for the consequences it will have, because this is the diktat of the empire. The diktat of the empire is that it does whatever it wants to lands and human beings. And instead of reacting in the only possible way that I can think of to get out of this deranged way of seeing the world, is meaning stepping out of the bubble and uniting against this madness. As I said, there are 193 members of the international community, and at least 191 have nothing to gain. But this is the problem we have, and the Arab region shows it better than anywhere else, possibly. The contradiction, the intimate contradiction and separation that exists between political elites and the people. I don't think that there is any geographically any place in the world where the plight of the Palestinian is felt as deeply as the Arab world, but simply because among the people, the cause of the Palestinians is deeply felt, including in Lebanon, where the Palestinians have also been associated to the dark page of the country's history. And still, no one can tolerate what's happening. At the political level, there is a schism. And with this, I move to the second question. There were two questions on the role of Arab states and the posture of Arab states, and I will answer them together. Look, I haven't. There is one book that more than any other and explained to me the political failure around Palestine that has nothing to do with Palestine, and it's The Crusades Through Arab Eyes by Amin Malouf, that shows the limitations of protecting each other while being so divided. The fact that it's not state, it's people in the region have tended to make alliances with others without thinking united, as a people. And probably the only exception I can think of was the period of Pan-Arabism, without romanticizing. That carried problems as well. But this is something that carried the potential of reframing the region, and with Palestine being part of it, like resisting to European colonialism. That was a litmus test, and it has been lost so far. I mean, things might change, but I don't think that the Arab region is equipped as it needs to deal with it, not equipped financially, not equipped with material resources, equipped with political will. Because there are certain countries in the Arab region that are already thinking as vultures on how to profit from the spoils of the Palestinians, being them in Gaza or elsewhere. This is disgusting, but this is the reality we live in. And if the change, so as there are many awful things and behavior in the West, I don't think that in the Arab region there is necessarily a virtuous attitude. And I mentioned Morocco, but it's not different from what it's happening in the UAE vis-a-vis Palestine. I mean, protests in solidarity with the Palestinians, of course, they have happened in France, Germany, Italy, and the UK. Hey, they have happened in the Arab region as well. So we should also talk more introspectively on how each of us, in each country, in each society, we can do, how we are reacting to this. Gaza today has put ourselves in the face of a mirror, and it's really projecting on who we are as individuals, as societies, as countries, as part of the international community, and as the international community itself. So I think it would be so nice for the Arab countries to stand together as part of the global South. But I wouldn't divide according to lines, because there are countries in Europe that are trying to do things differently. And while they need to do more and they have the responsibility to do more, I also would like to point out that there are so many people, including myself. I mean, the reason why I am where I am and I act as I do is because I have nothing to do with the Palestinian people. And it's not because of being pro-Palestinian. I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-justice. And I think that no one should be treated like the Palestinians have been treated steadily for 100 years. So they still epitomize the injustice of an imperialistic colonial society, which and it has sort of sprouted and germinated across the world and has committed many genocides from Europe. So the reason why I'm so committed and dedicated to this is because I have a chance to do things differently as a European. And there are so many like me. So I don't want to really divide, according to ethnic or state-like lines, the world. No, there is so much that is rising, and we are still acting in silos. And I will revert to the silos because there was a question on that. The crackdown, did I take personally what happened to me in Germany? No, because this is what I told the Germans. I mean, the fact that they canceled, that the university canceled talks that hosted me, a UN special rapporteur, someone whose only crime is to have mentioned from the river to the sea. And again, as I said, the Holocaust in the context of other genocides that have been committed. This leads to criminal charges in Germany. So it should shock. This is not my problem. This is a German problem. And if they don't react to this, as they have not reacted to the crackdown of their police on young or old protesters, Christian, Muslim, Jews, and atheists, doesn't matter who they were. It was just that they were just standing in solidarity with the Palestinians and with Palestine. I mean, they are really sinking into a state of repression, and they don't see them. Today in Germany, it doesn't feel like 2025. It feels like 1925. And if people don't wake up in the face of this, it's a problem for everyone. But again, I cannot. It's not that I resent this as an individual. I resent this as part of a global collective, which will be affected by the resurgence of fascism. And it's happening in Germany. It's happening in my own country. We should have been more aware that when individual rights start to be compressed and repressed, this is where we need to react. And we have not done it for far too long, I believe. What to tell young people who like to work in the UN? Frankly, I don't think that this should be the question right now, because in 5 years from now, we don't even know if the UN will still be there. If it keeps on, it's being dismantled day by day. it's being eroded, the very foundation of the system that we live in. I hate sounding that alarmist, but we need to understand that nothing is going to look like it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The system is collapsing and it's falling on our head. So I don't even know, again, if the UN will resist this, because the UN has proven to be as fragmented as ever in the past 15 months. It has not been able to protect UNRWA from all the attacks that it has received, because even the UN didn't protect UNRWA. And I'm personally so frustrated with it, not only because I've been in UNRWA, but also because I know what UNRWA is. And if dismantling a UN institution like UNRWA can happen, no one is secure, because unlike other agencies, UNRWA it's a subsidiary body of the General Assembly. So I'm not saying member states shouldn't try to have it dismantled if they think that if this is what the international community think, although they should think of how to resolve the question of Palestinian refugees before. But the point is that whatever discussion should happen within the General Assembly, within the realm of the multilateral system, and not outside, and shouldn't happen again through these mafia-style techniques and alliances. The lawlessness that I've seen in full display and fully deployed in the past 15 months is something unprecedented. Yes, and I do see that there is a tendency to operate in silos, but I also see that there is still a tendency to, while the condemnation for what has happened in Palestine and in Lebanon has been much more silent, much less audible than it should have, because what we have seen in Gaza and soon after in Lebanon should have scared the hell out of us as global community. It has not, because everyone thinks in the silo, oh, it doesn't concern me, so I'm fine. And the condemnations from various bodies are welcome, but are not sufficient. Today, either deeds follow words, or I would say spare the words, because we are past the point where we can still cope with the gravity of the situation on the ground with words. The system is, I do see the flames, the system is on fire, the system is burning. And the system is what we have hoped to use in order to protect each other. We will not have it. We will have to rebuild everything from scratch. And I don't think that as individual human beings, we can do that. We need to use the states as much as possible, and to use all states together. Eventually, Israel and the United States cannot wage a war against everyone and anyone. So but again, I see that it's the awareness to prompt this sort of unity is too slow, and it's too little right now to face this. That doesn't mean that we don't have to continue nagging and pressuring for that. But we need to break the silos for sure. And there is no political will. Again, I don't think that the problem is with the speed the political will needs to form to face the current reality. Because in member states are still dominated. For example, in Europe, while there is now, leave Germany aside for a second, in other countries, like in the UK, for example, there has been huge, constant mobilization, and it continues, while in other countries has sort of faded. In other countries like the UK is continuing, but also look at what's happening in Serbia. If we were able to see the world in the turmoil it is, we would also understand probably how to unite. In Serbia now, there is a student movement, which is, it's comparable to the movement you had at the beginning of the Arab Springs, where everyone is rising from the ground, and the students are carrying with them others, and are being welcomed and protected. It has reminded me of when the Lebanese created that human chain from one place to another. And this is what we need today. We need to really reconnect to one another as humans and see each other. And I mean, mine sounds like fairy tale, but eventually this is what Edward Said used to call us upon. Like, humanity is the only resistance we have. And today is real. Today we can make the difference. But if we don't even understand the kind of world we live in, and we keep on thinking of what kind of job we want to do next year, this is where I think that we have lost it. We do not understand we cannot think of it as individuals. We need to think of the future as a collective, because while we have nothing to gain to run ahead alone, we have that much to save all together and to win if we stick to one another. And this is the time where we also change our habits. You see that, in a way, the struggle for justice in Palestine or the struggle for justice in Lebanon is not different from the struggle that many young people are carrying out for a more just environment. We have a lesson to learn. We cannot continue business as usual. And it happens at state level. It can continue in Palestine. Israel cannot continue business as usual. The Palestinians have demonstrated it, and they are resisting. And they have lost a lot, but still they keep on resisting. Same thing at the international level. The West, the imperialism cannot continue as it was. But this is where we as individuals need to make choices. Understand that we have entered a phase of austerity. We can buy less, we can consume less, we can be really different human beings and try to preserve instead of to consume. If we consume less, we will be less vulnerable by the economic circumstances. And again, I hope you follow my reasoning, because it goes beyond the silos also of international law versus all our disciplines, and centered the discourse around us as a human family and as a humanity.
Thank you, Francesca. I mean, what you've articulated just now, I mean, also thinking about lawlessness as the new normal and the systems that are collapsing, and us watching a genocide live streaming and seeing the Palestinian people running out of words, and the whole solidarity movement running out of words to articulate death and destruction and the wrongdoing that has been assaulting us. It's such a violent exercise for all of us to be in this room and yet again having this conversation. So the whole exercise is such a violent exercise that we need not only to be in rooms to articulate the genocide and the destruction of educational systems and emerging language of ecocide and scholasticide and all these new terminology, just for us to articulate how bad things are and how criminal this machine has been in destroying a full destruction. And yet, instead of talking about sanctions and reparations as the new normal, we're seeing the Riviera of the Middle East. And the Riviera of the Middle East is not even being made with the consultation of those that should be making and worthy of living in the Riviera of the Middle East. So yet again, we see another moment of the Balfour they imagined and re-articulated, a modern 2025 Trump version of the Balfour Declaration. One more time. I love the way you articulated what we need today to do more than ever is really to break the silos. We used to hear before break the silence, and that was a big movement. So today, I think our biggest takeaway is really for us to continue connecting, to continue being together, and to continue doing the work that you're doing, and you're relentlessly being a fighter, a real fighter for not only the Palestinian people, because you've said it now, you're not a pro-Palestinian. You are a pro-justice, you're a and I'm saying this jokingly. But how we continue, how do we continue? How do we continue the fight, all of us here? And how do we continue connecting together, doing the work that we're doing, all of us together? Our partners here and your presence here, if each one of you can come up with one thing that we're capable of working on together, we will continue, and we have no other choice but to continue. With that, I bring our event today to an end. I felt like we had so many, can you hear me, can you hear me, can you hear me? So please, let's continue hearing each other, and let's continue being together. And we promise for next time we'll have a better can you hear me situation, less glitchy tech situation. I thank Issam Al-Faris, Dr. Jo Bahout, Marina, everyone for making this possible. PSPA, Dr. Tare, and all my colleagues, Dr. Jamil. Shukran كتير كتير. And I thank you all for being here. PLSC team, they're around. Get in touch with them. And Francesca, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes. We made it. Yeah. Thank you.
So next
Thank
time,
you very much.
Francesca, next time to avoid all of this, you need to be present in the room. Now now this gives you more than ever a reason to be in Beirut next. See you soon.
Look, you don't have to give me any incentive to come to Lebanon.
So it's not a Zoom situation
if I didn't have
kind
two
of
kids
thing.
waiting for me, I would already come straight from Germany. This would have been the nice compensation for all that.
That was
lack
the
of good
plan.
manners.
That was the plan, but we'll see you next.
Yeah, next time.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.